Eoin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. I'm surprised anyone else is here. You do know these books are for kids, but...
So speaking of kids, looking back at the very start of your career, before you even had a career, how did writing slip into your life?
I remember the very first thing I wrote, and this was, strangely, this was before I could write. I had seen people writing, and I was like 4, and we had a chalkboard in our house. So one day I decided, I knew how to write. I just decided I was going to write. So I was squiggling on the board, and I decided, I don't know why, and it seems in retrospect possibly not a great idea, that this story would be about Rolf Harris. So I drew a picture of Rolf Harris as best I could. He was very popular at the time, this would have been 1969, so he was quite popular. And my mother came downstairs, and I was a little bit precocious, and she said, "Oh, you're writing a story." And I said, "Yes, Mother." And she said, "What's it about?" I said, "Well, if you want to know what it's about, read it, why don't you?" And she said, "Well, at least I do know it's about John Lennon." And I realized then my drawing wasn't very good, so I accepted John Lennon. But even then I was bitten by the bug, and I found very early that if I had a story in my head, the only way I could get that story to go away was to write it down. And even to this day, as soon as I'm finished the first draft of a book, it's like closing that drawer in my head, and that story is gone, and it doesn't bother me anymore. And which is why I hate editing, because you have to do it, we all have to do it, but you have to go back in and open that up again, and your mind has already gone on somewhere else. I've always just loved the act of getting a story out of my head and onto a page or a computer, and I think it's like therapeutic almost. It's just you feel better for it. I'm sure I'm working out something. I remember when I wrote Artemis Fowl, and I was talking to the director Jim Sheridan, and he had read it, and he sat down with me and he said, "You either hate your mother or you love your mother. I am not sure." And I realized that he wasn't right about that fact, but he was right that I was using storytelling to put my own life in order and to work out any issues that I might have. And I think that's something anyone who does music, paints pictures, does stand-up comedy, anything like that, anything artistic endeavor, you're really trying to deal with your own psyche.
So, but because it is your full-time work, do you still find it relaxing or therapeutic?
I still think of it as a hobby. I mean, in my mind, though I shouldn't say this because my family's here, I don't think of it as a job, even though I'm constantly shouting, "I'm working!" But actually, it's an amazing thing to be allowed to... I often tell kids, because I talk to kids mostly, and I say, I'm really lucky because very shortly now, and this is probably happening to most of you, you will be told, right, and I'm telling my lads, right, it's time to grow up now. It's time to knuckle down. It's time to engage with the world. I don't have to do that. People tell me, no, you don't grow up. Keep thinking about leprechauns. That's fine. And it's wonderful, I mean, yes, I have to pay the mortgage or whatever, but I don't have to really go out of my way. And it's great when you go to book festivals, because I can meet Jacqueline Wilson and we talk and we know exactly what we're talking about because neither of us ever had to grow up. So it's wonderful.
So when did you realize that you wouldn't have to grow up, that this was something that you could do?
I think when I was able to quit my job, because I was a teacher for 15 years, and Jackie and I taught. We taught all over the world, and it happened like in a single day. My agent went out with the first Artemis Fowl book to America, and we sold it to Disney, and we sold the movie rights, and that over one phone call. And I remember very clearly, I was on yard duty as a teacher, and and then I was in the infant yard, so that's all fluids, it's horrible, it's like nobody can hold anything in, it's just, nobody wants to do that, but they're nice kids, so you obviously, you're trying to keep them alive, and that's what you're doing. And my principal came out and with the cordless phone, and we had this thing where, if you're on yard duty, he'll tell you to phone back, and But he said, I think you should take this call. And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, it's your agent. And in a small town in Ireland, even to say you have an agent is enough to get you killed. So you don't, you keep that quiet. I hadn't told anyone I had an agent, because that's like, as you'd say in Ireland, that's like having notions about yourself. So I was like, I wasn't telling anyone. And unfortunately, my agent told him, Pat, he's a good friend of mine now, and then what the call was about. He said, there's 3 studios bidding on your book. And you could see in his face, he knew this was like a moment. And I kind of knew. And there was kids bleeding all around us, and we just ignored them. I reckon I could cover the lawsuit at that point. So, but I do remember that. And I remember that was the initial thing. So I went home to Jackie, and we were expecting the call before close of business in LA, which was, of course, 8 hours or 11 hours, whatever it was, 8 hours after Irish time. So we just sat in the kitchen waiting for this phone call, and it was the most surreal thing, if you've been plugging away at writing for a long time, which I had, to suddenly break like that. It's quite unusual. And so a few weeks later, when we had sold the book, I was booked in to do, or they wanted me to do tours of US, UK and Australia. So I had to leave my job. And I think when I gave my notice in, I knew that I didn't think I would be forever. I mean, I thought I'll be back here in 5 years, but that's great. I can have 5 years of amazing tours and writing books and living my dream. And that was, that's 20 years ago now, so it's worked out pretty well.
Has it felt?
Yeah.
Has it felt the same since? Is it like a very sudden switch between 2 kinds of lives?
The touring life, I had no idea, because I'm sure there's a lot of young writers in here, and the dream is to get a US tour or to get a UK tour, and it sounds amazing, and it is amazing, but you do spend most of your time in the airport. So if you're on a US tour, you spend every morning from 6 a.m. to 9 in an airport, and then every evening in an airport. So it's 5 hours a day in the airport, and then that's not even on the plane. So it's tough going, but you just keep telling yourself, this is what I've worked for, this is what I wanted to do. I had a one-man play out last year about a guy with multiple sclerosis, and so this actor had to portray this character for an hour and a half on his own. He had 70 pages of dialogue, and I said to him one day, this must be really tough, and he said, are you kidding me? This is what I went to drama college for. This is what I want to do. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm loving every minute. And that is how I feel about, even if whatever the work is, however hard it is. And I mean, there's no holidays. You just work all the time. I know that there are 100,000 other writers who would love to be doing what I'm doing. And I try never to forget that. Even here tonight, it's amazing. I'm in Oxford talking to possibly very intelligent people. or wealthy, I don't know. So this is a wonderful opportunity for me. So I'm delighted to be here, and I have to keep reminding myself of that.
Well, you're obviously very welcome. Thank you. I was expecting a much more romantic story about how teaching inspired you.
Well, it did. I mean, but it did inspire me, but not in the kind of Hollywood. I used to really go they were the film movies I hated as watching when I was a teacher. You'd be there teaching, and it was hard, and there was awkward moments, and there was parents coming in who weren't allowed near their kids, and there was the day-to-day discipline problems. And then you go home and you turn on the television, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is the best teacher in the world, and you're like, no, this is, or Michelle Pfeiffer's amazing, and it always made me really angry that wasn't really a fair depiction of teachers. Now, there was some good ones, and now I know it's just a movie, so who cares? But at the time, I think I was in the trenches, and I used to get very annoyed. But I found the inspiration came very directly from the kids themselves. And I mean, I would literally take kids, their personalities, and stick them in books. And there was one girl, I remember, and she became the inspiration for Holly Short, who's like my heroine in the Artemis Fowl books. And she was just very intense. But she was intense because she wanted to learn, and she was in a mixed class. And at that age, I don't like to generalize, but mostly girls really want to learn, and then boys want to avoid learning at all costs. So if they see knowledge coming towards their head, they will dodge out of the way. You're not getting me knowledge. And what they want to do is to go home more stupid than they arrived. And if they can achieve that, now obviously that's a huge generalization. And in my 15-year career, I have met 2 boys who wanted to learn. So let's not. But there was this girl, and Rachel was her name, and she had like short hair, and she used to just glare at this guy who messed around all the time, and she would glare at him, and he was a massive, big rugby player kind of guy. So her looks just bounced off him, and then one day I was correcting papers or something, and I just looked out the window, and I saw her stalking over to this guy, and waving her finger very quickly at him. Now maybe she was saying, look, when I wave my finger, it looks like I have 3 fingers, but I think what she was saying was, you better shut your face. I'm trying to listen to that teacher, and all day you're like giving it all. And then she punched him on the knee, because that is like about as high as she could get. And she didn't hurt him at all, but he was just so shocked, like that this little girl would come over and like kind of assault him a little bit, and that he stayed quiet for like a day, which was more than I ever managed with him, you know. So I thought, this girl is fantastic, and I used to kind of not use her as a weapon, but occasionally I would say, that guy Rachel, he's really annoying me, and see what would happen in the yard. But she was so fantastic. I just snatched that personality, that kind of doggedness, and put it straight into a book. And so kids really did inspire me in that way. I suppose I always lean towards the funny, so I'm looking for that. But there's a real kind of undercurrent in that little story, like why was that boy why wouldn't he want to listen to anybody, and why was she so eager to learn, and that's what I find interesting. And we were very lucky in that very early on in my career, a brilliant writer. Some of you may have heard of the writer Billy Roach, who's an Irish playwright. And he came in to visit my class because I knew Billy. And when you see a storyteller turn it on like that, and you see the kids' eyes, and you can see, you could wave your hand in front of their face, they're gone. And that's a marvelous gift. And when Billy was actually very instrumental in getting me started, because he came to my house because my dad taught him, and he respected my dad, and he came with his manuscript for a book. Now, until that point, I kind of thought, you have to be Roald Dahl-esque to write a book. You have to be English, you have to possibly live on a farm with dogs, and have a shotgun, and have a little shed. And I didn't really think that a guy from Wexford, Ireland could do it. But Billy came to the house, and he was a normal guy. He had this giant sheaf of paper. In those days, maybe someone, I don't know if there's anyone in my generation here, but we had to print out on a printer that had rolling cogs, and then you had to tear off the perforated sides of every page. So to print out a manuscript was a big and expensive deal. And then you had to separate each page and make them into a pile. So it took a long time. So Billy printed out this book, and it was called Tumbling Down. And it was about growing up in the 60s in Ireland if you were a Beatles fan. And you didn't really have that much access to music. It was really funny, and it's a wonderful book. But at the time, I thought, this can't be good, because this was written by a guy I know. How can that work as a book? You can't do that. So my dad saw me looking, and I remember him saying to me, under no circumstances, they were going out for a pint. He said, under no circumstances are you to touch this book when I go, because he knew I would, and it was valuable. There was valuable paper and fingerprints on it. It's worthless, and I really wanted to touch the book. So, but they went out, and I thought, how can I? Because kids have a great way of willfully misunderstanding what their parents are saying to them. So I said, my father said to me, under no circumstances touch that book. I feel that there are no circumstances, so therefore legally I can touch the book. So I'd read the book very carefully, and it was amazing, and it was like a lightning bolt. Anyone can write a book. Oh my God! So that's when I started in earnest at about age 16, 15, to really feel like I could be published. But there was never a dream of being a professional author. I mean, that I never really thought that was going to happen. So all I wanted to do was hold the book in my hands, the published book. And if you ever have that moment, or if you've had that moment where you have your first published book and it's an actual thing and you're holding it and possibly a box of them under your arm, there's very few professional moments that can beat that. And for me, that happens nearly every time. You know, whenever I get that new book in, it's a really strong emotional moment for me, and it really feeds you and it keeps you going. And to be able to do it full time is just a total gift. And a lot of my friends are writers. Most of them have jobs as well, so it's a tough graft, but it's worth doing. I mean, I honestly think that if you are writing a book with the intention of making money, it's not going to be a good book, or it possibly will be a good book, but it won't be a great book. I don't think. You have to write the book because you need to get that story out. And I know that sounds a bit grand from a guy who writes leprechaun books, but it's true. You know, even those stories, the fairy stories, you just have to get them out there. And it's great that other people read them, but I think I would do them even if no one read them.
And the decision to start with fairy stories, or
well, I didn't start with that. I mean, I started with my first book was about Tunisia and living in Tunisia. And it was a funny book, but it was quite, it was very realistic, very gritty. And I didn't get on to the fairy stories until the third novel, which was like the fifth book. And I wrote a book called The Wish List. That was the first one. But I think in Ireland we grow up with fairy stories. You know, fairy stories are taught, there's a Sligo girl there, fairy stories are taught in Irish schools. Connor, you'll back me up there. That is true. Not so much now, but in the 70s I had a book of fairy stories that I would teach, and they were taught along in a history book. So the little kids were like, okay, which one is real? 1916 revolution, or this one about the ugly witch. We don't know which story is real, because they both seem equally outlandish. So they were taught side by side, and it was wonderful. I mean, we could not wait for history, because that's how we were taught history. Now, you were taught the real stuff as well, but every second thing was a fairy story. And every Irish child, knows the stories of Finn McCool, or they know the stories of, Satanta. We all know them. And most Irish writers have a crack at a fairy story eventually. And I was just lucky that mine kind of stuck. And when I was starting to write fairy stories, I thought, look, everyone from Oscar Wilde to Lady Gregory to Jim Fitzpatrick have told amazing fairy stories. So if I'm going to tell one, what do I bring to it? What I brought to it was, or what I decided to bring to it was that the fairies generally were very much part of legend, and they had stayed like that. So they had no technology, they had no civilization really. It was, living in caves and just flying around granting wishes. And there was, like, if you got a fairy in a story in Ireland, it wasn't really a backstory. He just appeared, and there he was, and he gave you 3 wishes, and then he was gone. So I decided, well, if we have evolved, then the fairies have evolved. So I tried to put a bit of evolution into it. So they were very technologically advanced, and they had a very complicated society, and they had problems with misogyny, and they had problems with ladies in the workplace. So they had the same problems we had, just a few years further on.
Do you feel you've taken anything a bit more directly from Irish stories?
I took, the whole premise of the first Artemis Fowl book is that a boy tries to capture a leprechaun to get the crock of gold. And that is the oldest Irish story there is. If you go, all the old Irish movies they made about leprechauns, they're all the same thing. Someone tries to capture a leprechaun to get the gold. And so I just wanted to do a 21st century version of that. And so the first book is really, really simple, but then it just got increasingly elaborate. And by the end of it, my editor was saying, you can't do that because you killed him in book 3. And I wouldn't even remember. So I really enjoyed those 8 books, but I was glad. I think it's like when you spend too much time teaching junior infants and you can't apply for jury duty anymore. That's how I felt. I had spent too much time with the leprechauns and it was time to just take a break.
There are so many details and so many stories in those books. How do you keep on thinking of new things?
Well, I don't really try. I mean, I don't sit down and say, now I must think of... I have like a whole raft of ideas and that I will never get to because it's just... I would say I would have 100 plans for books. Now, obviously 95 of those are probably terrible and should never be written. But it's nice to have like a fallback there that if I do run out, I can just go into my folder. So what I try to do is, it's like a horse race. I have loads of ideas, but then one will pull ahead and it will feel like the book that I want to do at the moment. And then that's the one. But once you do that, if you're a writer, a lot of young writers always say to me, I just started my book, but now I've had another idea which is even better. You have to be disciplined about that. So once you commit to a book, just write on a piece of paper, finish. I forget which American writer wrote it. It was just finish the damn book. Put that over his desk. And every time he thought he had another better idea, he would just look at that. And I think that's very true. You can write down the idea, you can store it, you can have it, but you need to stick to the book you're doing. Once you go over 20,000 words, that's it, you're in. So just stick it out and finish that book. And you will always have time to do the other ideas. Nothing is ever wasted. Even if you write that book and it's never published, you have learned so much that you don't even know about writing books. So once you get over, I always say to myself, once I get over 20,000, I'm in. I just turn off the other ideas and I focus on this one.
And more mechanically, when you are sitting down to write the book, what do you do? What do you write with? When do you write?
I walk around. When we're at home, I always have my computer under my arm. So I walk around and I'm always working. I love working. My only problem is I don't have enough time I'd love more time to work. I know I'm calling it work, but doesn't feel like that to me. I have a very nice schedule in that I go to a local cafe in the morning. Now, it's not kind of where people have to go to a cafe to keep warm. I love it. Like, I go down there and I sit in a corner table. It's a massive cafe, twice the size of this, and I just work for 3 or 4 hours. And occasionally someone comes in that I know and I'll talk to them for a minute. It's a lovely break. And then after lunch, I work at home. So I would try to get in 7 or 8 hours a day. Not as much as I used to. I used to do every hour I was awake. Now I try and do maybe 7, 8 hours, and I don't push myself as much anymore. And I work on a computer, just a laptop. I love the Macs. I know that's quite controversial, but I do. I like them, and I'm still a very slow typer. I type with just those 4. And my dad once said to me kindly, "Oh yes, you can type as fast as you think." And I don't know what he meant by that exactly. It was a none too veiled insult, but he was the same himself. So he was down typing his books, and I was we were both doing this. Occasionally, I will slap in a little finger there for just to jazz it up a little bit. If it's an easy key to hit, like return, I will get a little finger in there.
So how do you manage when you're writing different kind of formats, like with a book or a screenplay or a graphic novel?
You kind of have to put yourself in a different headspace every time. I think the most important thing about a project is the voice. And once you find what you feel is the right voice for that book, so if you read the Artemis Fowl books, but then you go away and you read the Plugged or Screwed, that's the thrillers, like it's a completely different voice. You would think it's a different writer. So I'm trying to inhabit the character that's writing that book. And that's very enjoyable thing to do, to try and find that character. Usually you will have to throw away the first couple of chapters, because by the time you get to the end, you realize that everything has changed. First 2 chapters don't sound right, they sound a bit tinny. So you go back and you redo those. But yeah, I loved that period before you start writing proper, when you're trying to explore the character and what he is. And if it's a play, then it's different because you've several characters. I mean, I really love when we get together with actors and they sit around and they bring something to the play. There's no point in getting an actor who can only do what I've written. I want them to bring his own 50% extra and make it better. And I love that because I can go away then, and based on his talent or her talent, I can rewrite that part more or less for them, and that's a wonderful experience.
Are there some of the formats that you prefer more? So do you really like working in the theatre?
I love, and this is where I usually lose half the audience, I love musical theatre. So I do love a good musical. We went to see, everybody's talking about Jamie night before last. Did anyone go and see that? It's fantastic, isn't it? And I wasn't convinced going in. I thought, okay, I know this story. Guy from Northern City wants to ballet dance or make boots for girls or be a drag queen. So I kind of know what this is going to be, but I was totally wrong. It's fantastic. And the guy who plays it is one. The problem with musical theatre is that it can be the worst. A bad musical is so bad, but then a good musical is sublime. So if you see something like The Producers or The Book of Mormon or something like that, it's just fantastic. So I've been doing musicals for a few years, and with a composer. So I think if my favorite thing would be rehearsing a musical, seeing that come to life. So yeah, at the moment.
So switching tacks a bit, the Artemis Fowl books are being turned into a movie?
Yes.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, the movie is coming out in August, and it's directed by Kenneth Branagh, and it's from Disney, and it's starring Judi Dench as the Maverick, as the captain. You know, initially the casting changed. It's supposed to be someone like Kurt Russell, and then I got a call to say it's Judi Dench. I'm like, that seems odd. But then I saw her acting. I thought, oh my God, she's absolutely amazing, because it's not my character anymore, it's her character, and she's just completely owned that character, changed it and made it better. So I kind of relaxed then. Up to that point, there was a little bit of trepidation there, I suppose, that it wouldn't be a good movie. But when I saw Judi Dench doing a part written for a 40-year-old man, I thought, great, you know, she's amazing. So I'm approaching it now with great optimism.
So you said you got a call and they told you this. So how deeply have you been involved with making the movie?
They consulted me with the script, with most of the drafts, and then we went to set a couple of times, and then I did a cameo in Northern Ireland. So yeah, I mean, we met everybody except Judy actually, and yeah, I think they don't need to involve me. I don't have any power, but they were very courteous. And I think because I know it is Disney who are a big, massive studio, but really it was Kenneth Branagh and all his people, and he's a total gent. So yeah, I was very impressed with him.
You did a cameo?
I did a cameo. It's so hard. I got so much respect for actors because I thought going down there that it would be very easy, because all I had to do was walk across the field and say a line, which I can never tell anyone apparently. And it was a very simple line. It would be something like, look, there are a lot of books there. Very simple. And all they said to me now was, all you have to do is walk, say there's loads of books there, just like you've just said it to me, and don't look at the camera. And as soon as, for some reason, when they said don't look at the camera, that was all, and not just look, I was glaring at this camera like it was my childhood bully. I was like, and then I started to walk sideways like a crab. So it's so hard. And I've been walking for a long time now. So, but it was a great day, and it was lovely to be involved, but they had to do 20 takes of me walking 8 steps. And you could see occasionally I would turn around a bit quickly and Ken would be like, oh, Jesus Christ. But when I was, you know, they were wonderful to work with, and I learned a lot. So, and I got scanned. I got 3D scanned so I can be made into, an avatar or something. So that's going to be fun. Actually, this may be an avatar for all you know. So no, it was very enjoyable. But my brother, my younger brother, who's 10 years younger than me, is not really easily impressed. And when he watched the trailer, he just texted me one word, Radiohead, and that was it. Because they use Radiohead on the trailer. So like that, he's sold. He doesn't even want to see the movie, he's just going to listen to the soundtrack. So yeah, I was very impressed that they would use Radiohead in a movie, Disney movie for kids. So that's a good sign, I think.
It's been a few years since the book series finished, which means this movie will probably be seen by a generation of kids that hasn't read the books.
Absolutely. I think it would be a good idea for Disney to just present this as a movie and not to really lean into it's a movie based on a book, because I think that can be off-putting if you haven't read the book. And I think they did that a lot with other movies and that people didn't know, not Disney, but just various movie companies. So I think just here's a movie. It stands on its own. You don't need to have read a book. And then if you want to, you can go read the book after. Because it's very different from the book. The spine is there, but they have changed quite a lot. Be fun though. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. We're all going to go and it'll be fun. But I'm trying deliberately not to know too much, so I'll have as much fun as everybody else on that opening night. I mean, I don't know I've seen the cast list, but I don't know who plays who. And it's there, but I just haven't read it. So I know the main few, but the rest I don't know.
So you didn't write this screenplay?
No, I didn't write. I tried. I did a version. I remember I did a version with Jim Sheridan for Harvey Weinstein, and we sent it in, and we just never heard from them again. 2 years later, well, I've never spoken to them, but apparently they didn't like it. But his way of doing that was just not to ever take your phone calls. So we thought it was dead in the water, but then when Kenneth Branagh came on board, and I think what was nice about Kenneth is that the first time I met him was maybe 3 years ago, and I went to his office in London, and he came to the book the right way, in that he was on holidays with his family. His nephew said, "Yo, you should read this book and make it into a movie," and he went, "Ha ha ha," and he read the book. And he really enjoyed it. And then the following week, Disney called him. He just couldn't believe it. He thought his nephew was working for Disney secretly or something. But so he said, I've just read this book. That's fantastic. And he was in straight away. So I think we had to wait a long time, nearly 20 years. But then finally all the stars aligned and it just happened very quickly.
It was a great Kenneth Branagh impression.
Was it? I thought it was like he was in the room. I know. So, yeah.
But do you enjoy writing? You've written other screenplays. Is that something that you enjoy as well?
I do enjoy it. I'd never gotten it right. I don't feel... I did a very small independent movie in Ireland a couple of years ago. And it was great. It was nice. But I just felt, even myself, okay, I'm not right quite there yet. So, and I think it's a good feeling I think it's good to be critical of yourself. I think Bowie said it best. He said, it's like when you're swimming and you just go a little bit out of your depth. You're not quite sure if you can make it back in. And it's a little bit like that working, I think. You just always try and push it a little bit further. And it's amazing that you can do that in any genre. You can do it in picture books. Some of the greatest books ever, I think, are picture books. And it's amazing how little kids can follow a very surreal picture book. And they have no problem. They just go on instinct. They know exactly what's going on, where an adult might not. If you read some of Oliver Jeffers' stuff, kids are just delighted. I mean, what I love about Oliver Jeffers' stuff is it's mad, but kids have no problem with that. There's one about a boy who goes downstairs, opens up his kitchen, and there's an airplane in there, and he's not at all. Of course, there's an airplane, so he just gets on with things. Whereas if that was an adult, it'd be, oh my God, what's happened here? Is this like another dimension or something? But kids don't need that explained. They love the absurd. So you can push the envelope, in whatever genre, whatever age group, whatever subject, there's always further you can go. And I think an excellent example of that is Douglas Adams, who took the science fiction genre and like just turned it on its head. And he became a satirist, a comedian, and a social commentator all in one, and an excellent sci-fi writer. So people like that and Terry Pratchett, would be my heroes.
I wanted to ask you about that, because you took over the Hitchhiker's Guide series just for the final one. What was that like?
That was everything extreme. It was wonderful, it was horrible, and it's one of those things where you look back at it and you think, was that the right thing? And you try and convince yourself, yep, that was right, you did the right thing. But honestly, I don't know. I mean, there's people who love that book, there's people who hate that book, there's people who won't read that book, and I don't blame any of those people, because I think if it had been someone else, I might not read that, because he was such a huge hero, and they rang me and said, would you do this? And I said no, and I said, and what's more, no one should do it. And they said, well, someone's going to do it. And then they rang me back the following week, and I had been thinking, and I had an idea, and so I said I would do it. And as soon as I said I would do it, I started to worry. And I worried, and it was to the point where it was stunting the writing. And two things happened. One, I was out in my office on my computer, and this was back, when I suppose Facebook was just getting big. It was 2008, 2009. And I was on Facebook, and at that time there was a banner at the side of the Facebook window, which was like a random ad, or for some society, like, do you like Michael Bublé or whatever? And people would click, yeah, fantastic. And this one came up one day, signed the petition to stop Eoin Colfer writing Hitchhiker's Guide. And that was not targeted at me, that was for the world. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible, like there's a petition. So I joined that society. And but you're going to join a society. And initially I was trying to defend myself. So I was saying, give me a chance, guys, maybe read some of my other stuff, and I think it's probably going to be a good fit. And it sounded pathetic even to me. So I went the other way, and I started to really slag myself off. So I said stuff like, I heard he buys his jeans in the children's department. And it got really enjoyable. You could really tease yourself. And what happened was amazing, is that people didn't realize I was me, and they were like, why don't you just give him a chance now? I think we'll... And there was like a backlash. I spent all day on that site and slagging people who were defending me. And but what I realized was that it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean, like, Facebook and Twitter is like thoughts you never say. You just you'd say, I'm not going to say that, it's too stupid, and my friends might hear it. I do love Instagram, because I think at the moment Instagram is very positive, and it's just, you like the photo, do you not like the photo? I'm sure it will go mean, but at the moment it's lovely, and I really like it. And most people are people, so they're lovely, but the people who are not lovely seem to make the most noise, and it can be quite a hostile environment for people. But I think I realized then, none of this means anything. And I had a hard time connecting to kids who feel that they're being bullied by the internet for a long time. Because I thought, well, why don't they just, not go on the internet? But I realize now that it's life. It's their entire life. And it's like, for me, as a guy, I'm 53. So for me, it would be like watching my favorite TV show, and all the ads are about me. And that, how horrible that would be. And to know that all your friends are watching this TV show, and all the ads are, about me, it's terrible. So I try and stay out of all that, because you can get sucked into these bottomless pits of, and it's ridiculous. I mean, I get comments like, you're ugly and you have a stupid face. Like, how do you, that's possibly true, but how do you deal with that? You just have to ignore it. But anyway, as I was saying, I joined a society. I realized it was ridiculous, and it kind of took the pressure off straight away. And then the second thing was, this is a story about Jackie. I don't usually tell. It's not a bad story, but there's a character in Hitchhiker's Guide called Zaphod Beeblebrox, you may know, who has two heads. And I was thinking I would remove one of the heads and have it kind of follow him around in a glass sphere. I thought that would be funny. And they could have more arguments. They could split up a bit. But I knew that the fans would be upset by this because it was a change to the canon, if you like. And so I went into the house and Jackie was there and I was moaning around, a very Irish man. Just moan until someone asks you what's wrong and then refuse to say. So eventually I was finished being dramatic and I said to Jackie, well, there's this alien, fictional, intergalactic president with two heads, and I'm thinking of taking off one of the heads, and I'm worried that there'll be some guy living in his mother's basement in Texas who's going to be a bit upset by this. And Jackie looked at me and she said something very wise. On the surface, on the surface it's a very direct comment, but when you think about it, she said to me, well, I have to collect the children. And when you think about that, it means, in a nice way, why don't you get yourself a real problem? Because that is not a real problem. And it was that simple comment that kind of turned it around for me when I finished crying. And then I was able to go on and write that. But I mean, the book did really well. And the third thing, I'm going to bar Sean now. This is my 15-year-old son. We did the launch in the South Bank Centre. Do you remember? Yes, you do. And there was a bit of hostility, in the line. There was people like, I'm buying this book because I have to have the full set, but I'm grudgingly throwing it on the signing table for you to sign and making extended eye contact. So there was quite a bit of that, and I was signing away, and Sean was, how old were you? 6. So Sean was 6, and he was fed up, and so he came over, and he sat beside me at the table. He said, can I sign? I said, yeah, sure. And they gave him a pen. It diffused. How are you going to be angry? It's a little 6-year-old cutie, but look at that face. Little 6-year-old. Sorry, Sean. And he just signed, and he was taking ages to sign Sean, so it held up the line by 4 hours, but everybody was so happy, and they all wanted Sean's signature. Everybody wanted Sean's signature, and it just literally changed the mood. It was like someone had brought a little fluffy dog and just put it down. Oh, I feel like I'm in trouble. And it was great. It's like the whole thing changed, and for that experience, it was wonderful. But the best part of that was they did the radio show with all the original cast, and they all came on stage, and I had a little part in it, and that was fantastic. But the book itself, and should I have done it, and I don't know. What would take the heat off me would be if they did a new Hitchhiker book every 10 years, and they got a celebrity, they got Stephen Fry or somebody to write one. I think that'd be nice for me, because then it would be, I would be better than him. Maybe, I don't know. I probably not, but I would hope they would get someone who's not great.
On that note, I think we might take some questions from the audience, if you're all right with that. So please put your hand up and just wait for the microphone to come to you. Start over here in the purple.
Eoin, I believe at one point you received some fan mail that simply said Eoin Colfer, author, Ireland. Is that true, or is it another Irish myth?
Did you send that? No. No, I did get that. I've got a few like that. I've got Eoin Colfer. Sometimes it's just, I think that the most vague one I got was Colfer, Ireland. And that got to me. But there was drawings of leprechauns on the envelope. The weirdest one I got was because the Americans but they check all the envelopes going out of the country. So it gets sent to Disney, they check, and then they send it on. But they didn't check this one. I don't know why. I think it slipped through because it was purple envelope and had little stickers of ponies, and it looked really nice and sweet. And then I opened it, and it was a guy, a topless guy with 2 machetes, and God bless America, and he tattooed on his chest, and he was my biggest fan in prison. So.
And you still have that? You've kept that, surely?
I have it somewhere. In a way, it's hard to know how to deal with that, because it wasn't a threatening letter. It was it was this like, this is me, I'm cool, and I love your books, and they're great to get me through the nights here. I mean, that's lovely, but I just, why would you think, let me send this kid's author some machetes, I'm sure. And I got one, I remember I got a series then from this guy saying, I'm one of the fairy people. You've discovered our secrets. We will stop you at all costs. And I thought, okay, it's funny. But then I got one saying, you're coming to New York. We're going to find you in New York. And I still didn't take it seriously. And I went to New York. And there was this guy, back in those days, they were a lot more lax about security. But this guy has this hoodie up, and he was hanging back. Now, if you're an author, like the hang back you always worry about, because they're probably going to give you a manuscript. And that's lovely and everything, but usually you don't have time to read manuscripts. So, but this guy was hanging back, and he waited and waited, and then he came up and he said, "Did you get my letters? I'm one of the fairy people, and we have to stop you." And I was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ." And then he said, he pulled down, he said, "Ha ha, I'm an actor. That's my audition for your movie." Like, that is a serious lack of self-awareness. So he said, "I hope it didn't frighten you, and I'm still in for the part." I said, "Yes." But obviously didn't. And that guy went on to be Tom Hardy, so that is pretty... No, that wasn't Tom Hardy. But yeah, that was strange. That was the strangest one. But not even worse than that is when, if you're not familiar with the books, at the bottom of the books there's a code. And a lot of kids decode that code and then write to me in code. And I don't read code. So every time I'm opening fan mail, I'm going, please God, English, because if they write it, you've got to decode it and write back. It'd be very churlish not to do that. So.
And do you write back in code?
No, I don't. That would be a step too far. I think that would be enabling the code correspondence.
Might take another question. Just right beside you.
Hello, my name's Joel.
Hi, Joel.
My question relates to your process of writing.
Yeah.
Your very first book. Developing your manuscript. How many people would you get to read through it?
Yeah.
How would you take the criticism?
Yeah.
What's like that process? How do you go through it?
Well, starting with the criticism, I used to be quite bad at taking criticism, and I would like seethe quietly. But then after the first book, I realized, wait a minute, my name is still on that book, and it is quite considerably better. And I began to relax a little more about it. And then I went through a period where I would just take every criticism as true, and that's not good either. So you have to arrive at that place where you have a certain confidence in your own work, but also be open to criticism. And you have to recognize that there are people who just criticize to criticize, and that's not valid. I don't really show my books to anybody until I feel they're very close to ready. And then I would show it to my editor. And if my editor says, okay, we're going to publish this, then I will give it to Jackie. But I don't get any readers. But that's just me. I have many friends, respected and wonderful writers who shared with a lot of people. And they have groups of people that they share every book with. And I think that is very valid. Because sometimes it's like being right up to the screen of a movie. You can't see the whole movie. So it's good to have someone. I'm very lucky in that I have 2 main editors that I trust, and they're great. And so whatever they say to me is usually correct. But I wish when I was younger, there wasn't really writing groups or reading groups. I didn't really have access to people. And so the way I wrote was in isolation, because that's how it was. We lived in Africa or we lived in Saudi, and we didn't really have a circle of readers there. So I just write myself, and then, but I think I am my own worst critic, so I'm tough on my own work. So if someone else has said something to me, usually I know they're right, because secretly I had been thinking that, and I just didn't want to face the fact, because it would be a lot of work. So if you find, usually as a writer, the thing that annoys you the most is probably true. So if someone says something to you and you just find yourself wincing, that's probably because they're right. But people do say ridiculous things. The one example I give of like the Hollywood thing is, I was doing, but I'd say it's 8 years ago, we were doing a meeting for the movie, the first movie of Artemis Fowl, which never happened. And it was amazing. They took us down to France, put us in a villa. There was a director. They brought down some storyboard artists. I thought, this is like, they're going to make this next week. This is amazing. And the director said, okay, guys, he said, we need to put down some kind of ground rules. So now when we're workshopping this, we won't go off the rails. And he said, my first ground rule is that this book is set in a manor called Fowl Manor, and that manor is in Ireland. And the movie guy said, okay, could it be in space? And I knew that weekend was done. You know, he was gonna, and that's what happened. Every time someone came up with something, this guy would say something. Could there be cowboys? Could there be? And you'd say, what? Who are you? Why are you here? But he destroyed that whole weekend, because we went 2 pages forward, 5 pages back, and we came out of there with nothing, less than we went in. So you really have to try and avoid that kind of negative. There are people who are not creative, and to kind of overcompensate for that, they'll be super negative. And that is not helpful. You want someone who, if they see a problem, can offer a solution. So if you have people that you trust, if you're in a writing group or a reading group, or if you've got friends that you trust and that will tell you the truth without being too mean about it, definitely seek those people out. I certainly would have, and I do more now. But at the time, we were quite isolated. Okay?
Great. Another question. Yeah, right here. So you could just wait for the microphone. And could you stand up when you ask the question? Thank you.
One of the books which I happen to remember, a little known one and very hard to find one, is for the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, in which a set of 11 were published, and the very first one was yours.
Yeah, that was not my finest moment. They asked me to do one of the Doctor Who books, and I thought this would be good because Neil Gaiman was doing one. I thought, right, if Neil Gaiman's doing it, I'm in, and he's one of my kind of heroes. And so I said, well, I'll do the first one. I said, I'll do it if I can do the first one, because I knew the first one would get a lot of press, and Neil Gaiman would get a lot of press, and that would really be probably it regarding the press, because new Doctor Who book is great, and then the following week you're not going to get that same headline. Another Doctor Who book, it's not. So I said I'd do the first one. Now, I thought this would be an exercise for me, because I had never and still have never seen an episode of Doctor Who. So I thought, I wonder, is it possible from kind of anecdotal and casual knowledge of the character to write a Doctor Who novella? So there was 15 minutes of the first episode ever of Doctor Who on YouTube. You can find it there. So I watched that. I thought, yeah, I know who this guy is. He's like Scrooge, but he's Doctor Who. Okay, cool. So, and I set off and I wrote this book. And it was a really good adventure story, but it was a really bad Doctor Who book, because Doctor Who is not really about the adventure. And my friend of mine, and this is actually the type of guy, Joel, you should seek out, he said to me, he read it, and he said, that is the best Star Trek story I've ever read. And I thought that was a very good comment. Like, I had totally missed the point of Doctor Who and just made a kind of an action space movie, And it's a nice little story. I mean, if you can get it, if you have those books, just read it and you'll see exactly what I mean. Whereas everybody else was a massive Doctor Who fan. and they put in the work, and they put in the research, and they wrote brilliant stories, and mine kind of it was fine if you'd had James T. Kirk doing it, but Doctor Who, no. So I do apologize. I learned an important lesson: do not take anything lightly. You know, everything you're doing, give it 100%, and don't kind of try and skate. So that was a.
Well, my question was going to be, would you consider writing anything for the series? Which I understand is obviously a no now. But would you consider venturing into any other TV series?
I would, having never seen. I will watch all the Star Trek movies, and then I would write an episode of Doctor Who. No, I believe Mallory Blackman, who's a friend of mine, wrote one, and it was amazing. And it got so much praise from everybody, about Rosa Parks. But I haven't seen that. But I'm definitely gonna. I wouldn't, and they wouldn't ask me. I don't think they would. They learned their lesson. They got burned, you know.
What of any other
Shame
TV
on you
series?
if you know. Sorry.
What of any other TV series?
I have done a few now. I did Iron Man, and I loved doing that because I knew about Iron Man and I'm a fan of Iron Man, and they said to me, now you're not allowed to do it. It's not Robert Downey Jr. It's the Iron Man from the comics. There's no crossover. I said, okay, it's not Robert Downey Jr. So I didn't use the words Robert Downey Jr., but it's totally Robert Downey Jr. because everyone who doesn't love that character. So that was very enjoyable. I mean, there's a few that I thought I would do if I was asked, like, would I do a Bond? I might, but I feel I don't really want to be. I've done 3 now. I did Hitchhiker, Iron Man, and Doctor Who. So I kind of don't want that to be my thing to cover other people's characters. But I have to say, I'd love to do Sherlock Holmes, or even more, I'd love to do Mycroft Holmes. I think there'd be a market for that if you just had a book called Mycroft. I think that could really work. And it would not be the guy from the telly at all. At all. So, but there's been so many great takes on Mycroft. I think Alan Moore did one, did he? And what was that book? Alan Moore did. Was it The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen? That was Mycroft was in that, wasn't he? So, I would do Mycroft because that really hasn't kind of been. It probably has been done, it's all been done, but it hasn't been done as far as I know, so I have a go at that.
Another question then, over here in the blue.
Hello, thank you very much. So you've been writing some books for children, and this is quite an astonishing thing to do because they are quite influential. Yeah. So it's quite influential. So I'd be interested in how far you were informed if your audience actually took up some of Artemis' habits or different habits, because I took up quite a few of those habits. Oh my! And
what's in that bag?
Yes, some of them.
What habits? Which habits?
So I'd be interested in how far you were concerned at that point, and how far you are informed about those habits now that your audience.
So far as I know. No criminal masterminds have resulted. But I know what you mean. But to me, Artemis was never really a villain. I mean, they like to paint him as a villain, but if you read the books, I feel he's like a hero in the making. And really, the message of, if you read even just the first book, the message for me was always that anybody can make this change. Like if this guy, like the worst guy you'll ever meet, at the end of the book does something heroic, for me, the message is change. Now, obviously, because I wanted to get a series, it was a very slow change. He didn't really become a hero, like a real hero, until the last chapter of book 8, which was the last book. And I did everything to stop him changing. Like he went back in time, he had memory lapses, he had clones, any corny thing I could do. And eventually I just had to realize, if he doesn't learn from this book, he's not a genius at all. So I had to let him become good. But so I think if you read the book, a lot of boys especially identify with that mischievous side. But what I've asked a lot of young boys about this, and I say to them, what is it you like about Artemis? Because I didn't know. I had written a book called Benny and Omar, which we talked about, and the guy in that book, Benny, he was a normal kid, he was a normal guy, he used to fight with his little brother, and one time he left him when he was supposed to be babysitting. And this, in the Irish press, people were horrified, he's leaving, what kind of example is that? And I'm trying to say, this happens every day. Like young big brothers skip out on what they're supposed to be doing for an hour, and they get away with it or they don't get away with it. It's not really, that's what happens. So when I wrote Artemis, I thought, they're going to go nuts here because he's so bad. But it's so bad that you can't really take it seriously. But what the boys told me, the theme that was coming through was that they loved that control he had over his own life. When you're 12 and 13 and you're just heading into puberty maybe, and life is very tumultuous, and you feel like you're as smart as your parents, and you probably are, but just without the world experience, and yet you have no control over your life. You're told to go to bed at 10 o'clock. You know, you have to go listen to these teachers who don't know what they're doing. But Artemis was able to stand up in class and totally destroy these teachers. And he had a bodyguard. He could do whatever he wanted. He was running all these games and plans. And they just loved the idea that you could control your life like that. Because and I hate to tell 12-year-olds, it doesn't really get any better. That we all feel most of the time like we're not in control. And they liked that kind of certainty that Artemis had and the confidence that he had, that he would go up against anyone intellectually, no matter how old, and win usually. And that, I think, is what influenced him more than being a criminal mastermind. Because even though his title is Criminal Mastermind, he never really does anything criminal mastermindy. A couple of times maybe. What I had to do, what was important with these books is you had to finish it in a way that was very clever. So it would take me months to think of something Artemis could do to save the day, and he would just think of it in 5 seconds. But that would usually take me about 4 or 5 months. And as the end of the book came near, I'd been worried. I haven't thought, he can't just, jump out of the car again. We have to do something really clever this time. And that would kind of consume you. So it was nice to write a few picture books when I finished those. Just there's a bunny, lovely, okay.
We might be able to take one more question, so we'll have over here.
Just following up on the movie adaptation and the gender swap for Commander Root. Yeah. Some fans are not happy about that. Not just because it's not faithful to the gender, but I think because in the book you talk about how Commander Root is quite tough on Holly because she's the first LEP female captain, and when you make her when you make Root female instead, do you think that kind of diminishes the sense of that dynamic between Root and Holly?
It destroyed that particular strand because you couldn't sustain that anymore, and that was my only worry. I don't mind race, gender, whatever. Whoever's the best actor gets the part, and they've changed a few. Like Root was supposed to be Asian, but now he's African, and I think we have a few. Kenneth has just swapped everybody around. It's a very diverse cast. But that was a story strand that Holly was the first captain in that particular squad branch, and the commander gave her a really hard time. He actually really liked her, but he wanted to toughen her up, and that kind of inspired her to really go for it. So now, if her commander is a female, that whole strand is kind of gone, and that it is gone. But they had to rewrite that relationship completely. I can't really say, unfortunately, what they did, but I think I was very impressed because I was wondering, how are they going to replace that? Because that's our impetus, that she's having a hard time at work. But they did, and it's very good. And I really was, until I saw Judi Dench playing that part, I didn't think it could be done. But she's unbelievable, and I hope that and as you're all here tonight and as you're all my friends, when the movie opens you can go down and get in for only £10. So that's not a special offer at all, really, is it? So but I hope you'll agree, and I think Judi Dench is just fabulous, but it's more than that. The writing is there too. You can't just kind of stand there and be fabulous. You need to have the writing behind you, and Conor McPherson is just wonderful. He used to ring me up, and this is the guy who's done a musical with Bob Dylan. Like, this is a guy who's had 4 plays on Broadway, and he'd ring me up and say, yeah, Owen, have you got any tips? I was like, no, you go. I don't have any tips for you at all. So, and he's like younger than me as well, which is even more annoying. But he's done a really fantastic job, and hopefully we'll move on and do the next one next year, which would be great.
I think that's a really nice place to end it on. Thank you so much, Eoin, for joining us.
Thank you, Brendan.